Germany will resume its cooperation with UNRWA, that's the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees in Gaza. Several countries halted their funding temporarily during an investigation into the agency's staff. Israel had accused dozens of the agency's employees of being involved in the October the 7th terror attacks. More than a dozen donors, including the two largest ones, the US and Germany, suspended their UNRWA funding as a result. Now, the recent investigation says that Israel has not provided evidence that certain UNRWA employees were members of terrorist organisations. Earlier, DW spoke with Germany's development minister about the UNRWA investigation. She had this to say about the agency's work.
That report shows very clear that UNRWA is able to do the job here, that it's not part of Hamas, that is separated from Hamas. And I think this report, we will analyze this report in detail. But the first, what we see is that this is a very important report to show that UNRWA is doing a very good job here.
Jonathan Fowler is the spokesperson for the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. Welcome to DW, Jonathan. Thanks so much for your time today. Can we begin with your reaction to the news that Germany will now resume cooperation with your organisation?
I mean, this is, of course, a very, very positive development. I do want to stress that Germany last month had already come forward with fresh funding of 45 million euros for our work in the West Bank, Jordan, Syria and Lebanon. So what we're talking about today specifically is a kind of unlocking of the remaining suspension on funding for Gaza, which at this critical moment, of course, given the absolutely enormous scale of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, is absolutely essential.
Mm-hmm. Did Germany and other donor countries act too hastily when they suspended payments to UNRWA without waiting for a thorough examination of Israel's allegations?
Well, of course, I mean, I'm not in a position to sort of be sort of inside the room in terms of the decision making. But I mean, what this did cause was a huge risk of an absolute unraveling of our operations in Gaza, but also across the rest of the region. And our agency, of course, is the primary humanitarian agency in Gaza, but also working with Palestinian refugees across the region. So the decision when it made, I mean, it looked like we were basically going to have to close up shop in February, but because we've had a number of returnees, and Germany, of course, is not the only government which has lifted suspensions, we've been able now to sort of push our operations kind of protected through to the end of June. Basically the kind of guillotine has been postponed over and over recent months as others have come back, but that doesn't mean that the situation is perfect beyond June.
OK. I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, the independent investigation concluded that while you have robust measures in place to ensure the neutrality of the organisation, there are still neutrality issues. What will the organisation do to address these issues?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we take fully on board the outcomes of this investigation. I mean, this was an independent review that, in fact, we had asked for before allegations against a dozen of our staff even emerged. It's important to emphasise that. So this was something we were aware that we needed to do because we'd over the years faced a number of allegations against, our neutrality of our staff. But the investigation did include that we have the robust frameworks in place, and in fact more robust than any other part of the UN system and many international NGOs. But what we are working on an action plan currently to take on board various recommendations, related to the work of our staff unions, for example, or indeed, how we deal with donor governments, our internal governance on these issues. An organisation with 30,000 people functioning in a very, very politicised context, which of course was flagged by the Colonna reports. It's inevitable that things won't be perfect. But I think, this is a case more of the glass being half full than half empty when it comes to the outcome of this review.
OK. The US, your most important donor, has decided not to fund UNRWA for another year. How will this affect you? How will you compensate for this shortfall?
Well, this, of course, is extremely challenging because, I mean, with the return of the number of donors, we've reduced the sort of financial hit on our organisation. But yes, indeed, with the remaining suspensions of 9 member states, we're still looking at a 31% loss of our income, and that's $267 million. And the United States makes up around 87% of that shortfall, almost 90%. The congressional decision to decline to fund UNRWA until March of next year is problematic. We do need to make up that shortfall, but I do want to emphasise we've had a groundswell of support. So not just the returning, suspending member states, but as soon as their decisions were made, we faced a groundswell of public support. We raised record amounts of money from individual and private sector donors in the order of 50 million. We've had governments, traditional donor governments, come forward with extra money. Spain, Ireland, for example, staunch supporters of our agency. But we've also had non-traditional donors, and the government of Iraq, for example, came forward with money. So this doesn't make up the shortfall, but it does. It has enabled us to reduce the dent. But of course, the issue of US funding is extremely serious, and we are hoping that they will also make a decision in our favour.
Jonathan Fowler from UNRWA. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.